Hello everyone, Kentu Tiger here with Bengali Engineering in Play. We are continuing on in Space Engineers, also continuing on in the Survival Series 2, and continuing on building, or rather correcting the builds, in the Behemoth Space Station, which is just getting ridiculous. So here's one of the things I discovered. Rotation was kind of screwed up, so I am going through and repairing some of the conveyor systems. So far, the repairs actually look to be going pretty well. One of the things that I was hoping would happen is basically these, well, obviously as I detach these guys here, the hope is that they will reattach. Now, surprisingly enough, they seem to be actually doing that. So what I ended up here was with 3 different ones, pretty messed up. And what I'm just doing is verifying that all of these guys are actually working as intended. Then we're going to go back through and check one more time just to make sure things are working as intended. So let me go ahead, just for experiment's sake. So this is Gatling turret 47. Obviously a lot of these. So what we're going to basically do is come back in here and have to discover whether Gatling turret 47. So you see it's green. And here's what I mean by it's getting absolutely ridiculous is there is so much delay and lag that things really are I don't want to say unplayable, but really rapidly approaching that. So you can't move. This is what I mean by unplayable. Is and obviously this station is pretty large. There's a lot of things going on. There's a couple scripts running in the background. It is still clearly attached to the station. So the good news is they have, as in they as in Keen, have done some improvements when it comes to taking things apart and putting them back together. As long as they stay on the apparent same grid, then you can reattach. Things didn't used to do that, so I'm very pleased with that aspect. So there were 4. I was just working with Gatling turrets. So let me go ahead and go back in here. There were 4, or sorry, missile turrets. I had not started on the Gatling turrets yet. So I've got all the hidden blocks turned on, and that's because everything was grouped, and once I group it, I take it off the main inventory. So missile turrets, there's a certain number of missile turrets, and actually it looks like all these are still there. So 16, 18, 21 and 22, I turned on the HUDs because they were not filling. So what we're going to do here is do the same thing, missile and turret, and then missile, because we actually want to find our main missile storage, which is out here, right here. And then we're going to scroll down and look at the ones that do not have any missiles in them, which should be these 4, and now they are indeed connected. So we've apparently remedied that, which is a good thing. Then 21 and 22, which 21 and 22, sure enough. All right, so we'll change it up here. Yeah, we'll go ahead and Gat turret. So we should have NATO ammo here in the same place. In this case, I'm going through and filling everything up all to max. And normally they would pull in all by themselves, but once they have a certain portion of them, apparently they are not doing that. Not sure why that is exactly. All right, yeah, let's. This is all part of the lag. All the things, all the enjoyable lag issues. 70. 72. All right. This is another thing that's kind of strange is that so your first. Let me go back up to the top. The first time of inserting materials into now the Gatling turrets are unique because they have an even number, as in the inventory volume will match. And this is a ×3, so they won't always match, but so 71 the first attempt to fill will be 1 less than max, and then they will go up to max. So 71, then we refill a second time and they will go to 72. So those are already at 72. 72, so here's a 70, so we'll go there, 72, 71, here's a 71, and then 72. So as long as I think about it, then I can do it all at the same time. It is kind of annoying. The lag, which will cause you to click on something, the intended object that you were intending to click, but not actually drag that object. You will actually drag another one, so this is all the joys of lag, or just not drag at all. So, I'm having... fuck. The aspects of the game where it truly gets unplayable is shit like this. So you all are witnesses. I'm clicking on the NATO ammo, but it drags things like missiles or motors. So I did not really intend for this to turn into a rant, but this kind of shit just is unacceptable in my world, and they're talking about, yeah, oh, it's ready for production. This is ready for release. No, not ready for release. Has never been ready for release. Still not ready for release. This is why I say game developers really need to play their games so they can see, oh my god, that doesn't work. So ultimately, why am I continuing on with this particular construction project? I want to see this through the very end, and then we'll delete the station gleefully and move on to a more reasonably sized station. In fact, we may just look at some of the past stations and paste something in. Either that or just make something a little more, yeah, motors. I really needed to fucking do that. Okay. So ISI is working but not working. As is pretty typical when things get absurdly laggy, scripts stop working. and 9 times out of 10, um, the only indications that you'll notice are just things are not working exactly as you thought they should. And then you go back to the programmable block where any given script is, and you'll see a warning message that it has terminated because the script is too complex. Now, why it can be, running fine one moment and then all of a sudden it's too complex the next is really another one of those mysteries that I don't think even Keen could begin to explain. But what I've noticed is that a reboot, which is really to say go out of the game, come back in, and magically things start working again. One of the other things that I've noticed as of late is the assemblers, which they get stuck. They pull in a random material that may or may not be in use or needed for anything, and if you drag it out, they will simply drag it back in. So I have fought with assemblers, gotten really frustrated, and then quit the game, come back in, and they all work fine. So yet another strange bug that comes and goes. Okay, so the good news is all the Gatling turrets filled up, which is exactly what I wanted. So at the moment, everything is working. So what I want to do is kind of back off here and show you kind of where we're at. Nothing up here has changed, so all this stuff has remained the same. The only differential here is that I actually finished, so we might as well review. So this was already attached. I think I had attached this here, and then it was a matter of figuring out what I was going to do for the gas generation and the assemblers. So the assembler assembly, the assembler array here is actually kind of hidden behind everything. The assembler array, just because of the way it was designed. So we have 2 rows of assemblers, 5 each, and then we have the upgrade modules all around, which then turns this thing into kind of a strange dual plus thing that's connected on the plus in the middle. So what I ended up doing is putting oxygen tanks around it, and using this top trough, if you will. If we go over here, we still have the same entry, which was on the end of the assembler array, and then we basically staircase up and in. So we use this top trough as the walkway because I still kind of had the concept of I want the player to be able to walk through this. Then it was the matter of figuring out, okay, how do I integrate all this stuff in? And keeping in mind I've got the 3 different conveyor paths, so the pull in, the red one, the gaseous, which includes the fuel ice conveyor system, which is the blue one, which logically fuel ice also contains the gas as well as reactors. In this case, I don't have the reactors on this one just because I have a reactor module, which happens to be over here. So I stuck the reactor module over here, and the reactor module actually comes off of main supply for its supply. So I did not really alter dramatically how the conveyors go through that, mostly because it would have made it a lot wider. This one is a 3 wide, 1 in, 1 out. And 1 in between, so I didn't want to make this thing dramatic, so I just left it as it was, and pulled through the reactors off the main. So that was a little easier. This one turned out to be a little bit complex because of the way I do the sorting. So in the case of the fuel ice conveyor system, there is a sorter that will allow really 4 things through. Uranium ingots, ice, obviously those two, fuel and ice, right? Hydrogen bottles and oxygen bottles. The reason for hydrogen and oxygen bottles is if all of my gas generators are over there, I would have otherwise no way to fill those bottles. So they have to be able to get into this system, which is why those two are specifically listed. Obviously a whitelist kind of a thing. There's also a whitelist sorter which connects it in the other direction. So we have a two-way into the fuel ice conveyor system and out of the fuel ice conveyor system, attaching onto the main supply grid. So the idea there is that if I pull bottles in, I have to have a way to pull bottles back out and put them onto the main. That also is a whitelist, only allowing those bottles through. So one of the reasons for that, one of the issues that used to be an issue, I don't know if it still is because I haven't tested for it, gases used to go, it didn't matter. If there was a conveyor there, it worked. If there was a sorter there, it worked. It didn't matter which direction the sorter was facing, gases would always go through and do what you needed it to do. One of the discoveries I made a while back, it was kind of random that I was connecting things in. It was a temporary connect, and I had set down an oxygen tank on the other side of the conveyor system. So the oxygen generator happened to be in the fuel ice conveyor system, which was intended. And I put an oxygen tank back in the supply system, and it did not fill. So ultimately, the way I had the sorter configured was it would allow the ice and the ice and uranium ingots through into the fuel ice system, but would not allow anything backwards through because a sorter is one way. So I did not have a secondary sorter that would allow things to come back through. And that oxygen tank did not fill up. So even though I was connected, it seemed like the gases now would no longer go through the sorters backwards. So from then on out, I started putting in that secondary sorter which would allow these materials through. Plus, it turned out to be a good idea because obviously with the oxygen generators on the fuel ice conveyor system, there would be no way to get the bottles in and out. So the bottles had to be added to both sides of the sorters rather, to get them in and out. So we added the generators here on the outside, so this became basically a 9 wide. It was a 7 wide with the 7 wide, 6 wide. Okay, so the assembler system was 5 wide. So basically 2 crosses turned up sideways, connected in the middle. So 5 wide. We put the oxygen tanks down the sides here, and then we actually continued the other conveyor systems on the bottom. So this was one of the interesting things. They're a little hard to see here. Let's see if my light makes a difference. No, my light doesn't make any difference at all. Don't know why that is, but absolutely no difference. So we had our pull-in conveyor system that came down the side here, which prevented us from actually putting in another set of oxygen tanks down here. In this case, this is the blue So the fuel ice conveyor system just comes all the way through, not only through the oxygen, the gas generators, but the oxygen tanks. So basically stuck oxygen tanks wherever I could, and then I continued this conveyor system down the side. So basically it goes, and then I filled in all the gaps with batteries in this case. So the other thing that we needed within the fuel ice conveyor system was fuel ice storage. So that was these 4 large containers here, and then hydrogen, because the hydrogen tanks are the same size as the large cargo containers, then I just stuck 2 of those in there. One of the things I've mentioned before, so there's a whole boatload of oxygen storage here, which is kind of unnecessary. And the reason I say unnecessary is the tanks don't really function as tanks in the Space Engineers world. Tanks will fill up and then they're full. There is no equalization of tanks. There is no storage for the sake of storage. And what I mean by that is you can use both oxygen and hydrogen that you've created and stored in tanks locally. You cannot do anything else with it. So what I mean by that is if I were to hook up a large vessel of some kind that would need to replenish its oxygen supply or its hydrogen supply, I would connect up to the station. It would be fully integrated and directly connected on with these other tanks. Absolutely nothing would happen to the station tanks. They would remain exactly as they are, which in this case is 100%. Now, if you logically work your way through and you know anything about gas dynamics, then all the tanks, if they're connected without any valvings or check valves or anything like that, are going to equalize in pressure. In other words, oxygen tanks connected to an empty oxygen tank, those 2 tanks are going to equalize in pressure. Space Engineers doesn't work that way. Why it doesn't work that way, nobody knows. Again, developers not really being engineers, I can accept that. However, if you're designing a game, ironically enough, called Space Engineers, then perhaps you should have an engineer as a consultant who can tell you how things work, such as fluid dynamics, gas dynamics, power, perhaps. So, anyway. So, there's only 2 hydrogen tanks here. What do these 2 hydrogen tanks do? They actually only provide hydrogen to the medical stations. Now, one of the other things I had to do, because this tank, for example, there are actually 2 oxygen tanks in this thing hooked onto the main supply. The tanks that were up here in the other, that were up here in the system. At least I think they were up here. Oh, they're in the center. Are connected onto. At least I thought they were in the center. There they are. Connected onto the mains. So the main supply. So there should be one up there, which there is, and one down here. So somehow when I built this, there used to be tanks in the top and the bottom. And apparently what happened when I pasted... I'm seeing... Oh, nope, I guess I'm wrong. I was... There should be 2 tanks. One top, one bottom. Unless I added that in later. Nope, there's one right there too. So what I had thought is I had rebuilt this and I had pasted in the wrong one, but there is actually tanks there. This one is unique because this medical station actually pulls off of the fuel ice system. And it is far enough away that it would not pull oxygen in by itself. So what I had to do was put a oxygen tank local here. Whoa, not what I wanted to do. So you can see I just jumped up to 100%, and then I'm adding power. Now, one of the things you're noticing here is what are all these funky colors on the HUD. There's a mod, I think it's called Just Another HUD Colorizer or something on that nature, which does indeed add colors onto the HUD. So colors. So pretty cool in how it does it. So added that in just for fun. Obviously does not affect the save game at all, does not affect the world at all, because it's a HUD addition. Alright, so kind of the tour, I think we're done. So really all we added on was the assemblers, and then this is a combined assembler gas production system there. We have ISI running up here, and I also got M-Master's LCD2 scripts running here. One of the things that ISI, I'm fighting a lot with ISI, and I like the fact that we can move stuff around. That's great and fine and dandy. I like having an inventory management system. What I don't like is that I'm fighting with, for instance, ISI has, as I'm learning here, really has no awareness of sorters. So in this case, ISI finds storage and decides it's going to rename storage according to what it feels it should be named. Now, whether that is appropriate, applicable, or anything else is absolutely irrelevant. So in this case, ISI decided it's going to rename all of these, which is to say the pull-in storage units, as it sees fit. The problem is, once ISI pulls stuff in and moves it around, then it can't move stuff back in because the sorters are there. The sorters absolutely are working. The sorter could give a shit that ISI is there. Currently ISI is fighting with the sorters in trying to move things around, because it has designated, which is to say ISI has designated these particular cargo containers as being something, and it wants to use those. So it's actually saying, can't move, couldn't move, couldn't move. So you see all this can't move, and the reason it can't move is because there's a sorter there. The sorter is absolutely not going to let anything backwards through and in, because that's the way it is. So if I have any criticism, which I'm actually going to comment here on their website, is this unawareness of sorters. And I realize that programming awareness of sorters is going to be very complicated. I absolutely accept that. But I'm still going to make the commentary because I think inventory managers, if they're working, there is the argument, do I need the sorters? And I think the answer is no. With ISI doing all the management, then clearly there's no need for sorters, because ISI is going to move things around and keep everything organized, and that's great and fine and dandy. In this case, I'm just going to let ISI do what ISI does, and ISI's going to keep fighting, and that's fine. So we have, here's what we see. So NATO rounds are stuck. We have missiles are stuck at 1 queued. Gravity generators are stuck at 14 queued. um, and thrusters stuck. Um, we'll go up here. You can see M Master's LCDs are working. Okay, so everything on M Master's side is working. We have more than 1,000 of everything. Okay, so I think our lowest quantity right now appears to be platinum. So you can see 173.3K in platinum, which is quite a bit more than the 45K, which M Master. I'm using all the default values here, which is to say this is the default value built into the M Master script, saying that, okay, in any given situation, this would be the ideal. And in this case, 45K would be ideal. I've got 173K. So I'm over ideal on everything. So 250K of gravel out of 40K, blah, 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 all the way down to my platinum, which is 173.3K of 45. So I have, what am I saying here? I have all the ingots I need to do everything. Okay? There's no ingot missing. So why are my assemblers not working? And there's the great question. Production. Why am I stuck? Well, it says I'm missing items. Well, what item am I missing? In this case, and this is Izzy doing what Izzy's doing, is trying to make everything work. So right now, everything is there. Everything is there. So why are they not working? And this is the question of nobody knows. So one of the things that may be a problem is just the fact that Izzy is moving everything around, and so there's assembler 1, which of course is not queued at all. Assembler 2, not queued. Assembler 3 is fighting. Maybe if we just force it to re-queue, things will happen differently. Maybe not. Yeah, so we're still having this trouble of things are not working. They should be working, but they're not working. And it could indeed just be Izzy trying to fight with everything. So I'm going to go ahead and turn Izzy off, just because. And then try and re-queue. So thrusters, which magically all of a sudden completed. Gravity generators 292, medical detector, explosives. That one's not showing ammo, so I don't know about the ammo. One of the other things that Izzy was fighting with. So let me queue up. We need 900 of. I can do that from here. So okay. Production. Just get rid of those two. Inventory. Let's show inventory. So main storage. And it doesn't even matter where everything is. I'm just going to move stuff out of the assemblers. So just get that out of the assembler here. So the goal here is just to clear out everything in the assemblers, and hopefully we can re-queue. See, at this point, none of the assemblers except for number 3. Number 3 had number 3 was full, and it had pulled in all the materials and was stuck at 3,000 inventory. The problem with 3,000 inventory is that's the max, and it's full, so it can't do anything else. So missiles. So let's go out. Missiles. So I need 900 NATO containers. So I'm going to queue 1,000, and missiles. I need 235. So I'm going to queue 300. So 1,000 and 300, right? Crafting, production, missiles. Sorry, shift 1, 2, 3. So these should all turn. All right, boom, done. And this will be 1,000. So most likely this is not an ISI problem. Most likely this is some kind of a conflict between the game and ISI, and that may be a bit premature on my part to say without having tested anything, but it's very possible that ISI is simply fighting with the fact that there are sorters in the world here, and you know, is fighting with sorters to make everything happen. So the interesting thing is that the assemblers are now working with ISI turned off, and that may be one of those things that you get your inventory built up how you want them, and then turn ISI back on. So not exactly the ideal. Obviously, if you use an inventory manager, that you want that inventory manager to do what it's doing, but clearly we do have some issues here. All right, so ISI not functioning here. One of the things that I want to do, so we have detector, explosives, and I'm using M Masters really as its as my guideline. So these are going to become my minimums, which I'll probably be a little over. So detectors, explosives, and solar cells. So 400, 500, and 300, or rather 500, 500, and 3,000 is what I'm going to use. So detector, explosives, and solar cells. So in this case, we're going to go into K. We're going to go into production. So detectors, which is right here. Shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Explosives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And solar cells is 3,000. So if all goes well, it will start creating those other things right off the bat. Yeah, there we go. So another thing I noticed with ISI, when you're first creating stuff, if it does not have it in the list and auto crafting is set up, then a lot of strange things will start to happen. You'll queue something and it will see it in the queue and look at it and say, well, that's not on my list, and it will dump what you've just queued, which is to say it will take that out of the queue. So I don't really like that aspect. Adding stuff in is a little bit challenging on the auto crafting. So anyway. So what we're going to do here is just let ISI do what ISI does. One of the other things that I want to do, I turned on disassemble excess. So I set this as true, and this was one iteration back where it just instantly started failing, which is to say the script is too complex, recompile. And every time you would recompile, then it would just terminate, which is kind of All right, go back into production here. Canvas was another one of these things, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to queue 500 just because. The other thing was interior plate. Now, interior plate here is recommending 55,000 according to the script. I've got 31,000. So 31 minus 55, or rather 55 minus 31 is, what is that, 14? So we're going to queue up 14,000. So there's my interior plate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There we go, 14,000. Those guys are going to take a little while. Good news is the assemblers are working cooperative, at least the 5 and the 5. Ideally would probably be to have, you know, a single set that's 10 long, which I've done before. So cooperative engagement is kind of neat. But these are going through very fast, as you can see. Some of the game mechanics, which you can see the inventory disappearing here. There it goes, then it starts over. So what it does is once you get full on inventory, it actually does push it out to the closest available container on the conveyor system on which the assemblers are attached. So it's pretty neat how it does it. That's built into the game, so no mystery there. All right, so let's do some construction. Interior plate is saying 10,000. We're going to change this. So interior plate says 10,000. We're going to change this to 55,000 because that's what this says. Computer 6.5. Computers are one of those interesting things that sometimes you need them and sometimes you don't. And metal grid, we're going to go ahead and change metal grid to 25,000. Bulletproof glass is really kind of 1,000. Interior plate is 55. Production control components, large tubes and small tubes. Let's see what they have. Small tube 26,000, large tube 6,000. So let's go ahead and look here and see what this says. Small tube 15, large tube 6,000. Alright, so let's go ahead and change that to the 26,000. So small tube 26,000. Okay. So we should see this increasing, which we are. So the only thing that is really left is the interior plate. So as the interior plate comes up to what it should be, then all should be well. And once that is truly up at the 55, then we'll turn the AC back on. All right. So what were the goals here? Sorry, let me get it turned over. Get turned over so I'm going the same direction as the station here. We have a few things left. So I wanted a hangar bay of some kind. And I was thinking about living quarters. Now the downside to living quarters is, what are you going to do for a living quarters where, okay, so the game does not require an engineer to sleep, so there's not really that. So what I did here was actually pull in a living quarters from another build, and it was a modular build, so I was just kind of looking at it. And this has double glass. It's probably light armor. I don't know. And then some things. Now, one of the things you see is I built this before the revision of Prosimian's armored conveyors, so things are really, really broken in there. As far as the things go. So I really don't think I'm going to build a living quarters. There's really no point. So we're gonna do a Control X on that one. And lag. This was a rebuild of a. Things are missing. It looks like. Okay, it looks like I did come back through and fix the no, I didn't. Either that or I fixed some of it, but not all of it. So the Prosimian thing is messed up here as well, which would be easily fixed. So a lot of times I will build modular stations, whatnot, and then kind of put them on the wayside and move on to other things once I build them. And that was the case here. I built something and then it worked out great. I built it, play with it, and then moved on to other projects. So one of the things, so this doesn't even have cameras all around, which is kind of strange. So this is my standard docking configuration. Now I've gone through several iterations of this, and some of the iterations were really about what was broken at what time. So one of the things you see here is a round airlock, which is actually a really cool airlock. This was made by Darth Biomech. There's the mods that I still use from Darth Biomech. I've combined into a single mod, so I can load it in a single line rather than 6 different lines. And I think I've got 6 different ones that are loaded in. And one of the Darth Biomech mods was the trying to remember what it was called here. Darth Biomech, the docking ring, and the docking ring clamp and clamp corner here work together. It used to be one assembly back when it was DX9, and when Hishi upgraded to DX11, changed it into a really a 2-piece. So there was a corner piece and then the actual clamp piece, and now you had to paste 4 of these around in a rotational circle versus the 1. And I'm not sure why that was done, because ultimately then you have to group them together. Now the docking ring, really neat. I like the model and everything, and it basically acts like a merge block. So the connecting in and everything functioned identically to a merge block. And one of the things I noticed as I was working with things and the way I did things was that the merge blocks, which is really to say the docking rings, would no longer function in conjunction with other. Let me back up. So, what you see here is a connection point on the outside here, and what I used to have was mergeless conveyors. So the mergeless conveyors actually sat out here, and then the docking clamp ringed this. So the docking clamp is still a 3x3x1, or actually a 3x3x2 mechanism. And what I found was that the docking clamp bounding box versus, and this was no fault of Darth Biomech, it was something related to the game and how it was interpreting basically the functionality of the merge block being right next to a mergeless conveyor. And so those two interacting, I could no longer get them right up close. So one of the things with the way the docking ring works is the bounding box actually is not to the extent of the model, because this model has the overlap from one piece to the other, so it actually interacts with itself in a certain manner speaking. So it was, for some reason, the game was misinterpreting the bounding box where it was, and it would no longer let them work. You couldn't actually get things close enough, given the build that I had, to have it work. So I changed a lot of things after that. The other downside to it was, so I had merge blocks in the center here, and so I had merge blocks next to the docking ring, and you had to release both of those one after the other. So once the merge blocks lit on, then that was because modified merge blocks don't, the game really, and this is the game just being broken, the game really doesn't interpret these modified merge blocks to function well. So it's a game bug. It's a long time known game bug that merge blocks that are modded merge blocks will indeed merge, and they'll hold as merged, but they won't function as a merge block from the perspective of they don't interact with one another like the standard vanilla merge blocks do. So you get them close, they turn yellow, and then you get them close enough and they'll actually pull everything together and turn green. So that was one of the problems that was introduced long time ago, and most of the merge blocks that exist today that are modded merge blocks of one kind of or another still function the same way. In other words, they're still broken because the game is broken. The interpretation of a merge block, as long as it's a vanilla block, works fine. If it's not a vanilla block, then the game just misinterprets how it works. So it functions as a merge block, kind of. And there's no real way for modders to fix that because the game is broken. If it's set as a merge block, it should function as a merge block. So what's wrong? Well, that's... Welcome to the joys of space engineers. All right, so this was my standard docking bay, which is why I brought it up on the screen here, but not going to be used. I don't think the idea was I could modify and actually put in my standard docking bay somewhere on this station, which would be really kind of neat to do, but not. So that leaves us with the hangar bay. What are we going to do with the hangar bay? So this is an older hangar bay. I was actually using some large doors. There were 4 of the doors, one on each side and then one out here in the front. And one of the things you see here is these single buttons that are now floating out on the air. which is unfortunate because they're not actually attached to anything anymore. Which is unfortunate. So I will have to deal with those. The idea here is what to do with, do I want to modify this in some way and use it, or do I just kind of build, and I think I'm just going to build something different. Because this is really just a base at this point. And while this is all nice, I like the fact that this has oxygen tanks and an oxygen generator built right into this thing, which I did with a lot of my builds. That way, even if something gets broken, and this particular design actually was entirely modular and mobile modular, which means you can see there's a cockpit here. So you could actually build this thing and then drive it, literally drive it to where you want it and connect it in. So that was the idea. And it actually, in that era, worked out pretty well. And my guess is this was built in the 140, 150 era somewhere, probably. You can see the Prosimian blocks are kind of messed up here too. All right, so that's a Control X. All right, so getting back to our Izzy problem here. So if we look at the M Master thing, something happened. So M Master is still working because you can see this one is scrolling, but we have. Huh. Okay. I miscalculated. Actually, is what it was. I am 10,000 short. So that was an oops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that was my oops. I calculated with 10,000 off. So once that is finished, then we have exceeded all of these. All of these numbers. Question is, how do we work this one? The other thing that I wanted to do was turned on, and I think I did that already. So it's an edit, and it was this. Generators, where was it? Up here somewhere. Disassemble excess, yeah. So this was causing the script to fail before. Again, no fault of the script itself. I already have that set. Interior plate 55, yeah. Actually going pretty quick. We should just have a few more. Back to this really laggy, stuttery, not working so well. Alright, so surprisingly enough, I'm just a hair under an hour. While I'm working through all of these little issues and coming up with new ideas, this is probably a good place to stop the video for this particular portion of the series. So this is Kenty Tiger signing off. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.